Welcome. This is Chorus Call. Welcome to Acea's first half 2019 results. I'd like to remind you that you're in listening mode only. After the initial presentation, you'll have the opportunity of asking questions. If you need support from the operators, number sign followed by 0. Now I'd like to leave the floor to Mrs. Irene Grisani, Investor Relations Manager at Acea. To you, please. And thank you. Thank you for being connected to Acea's first half 2019 results. Mr. Donnarumma, CEO of the company, will illustrate the results, and then it'll be possible to open the Q&A session together with Mr. Gola, the CFO, and Mr. Donnarumma, of course. To you, the floor, Stefano Donnarumma. Good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I, as usual, introduce the main topics. I would say that following the presentation on page 2, we can actually show you improved results, a significant improvement. In fact, EBITDA 503 million in the first half, with plus 12% versus the first half of last year. EBIT 260 million, plus 4%, and Capex grew as forecast in our business plan by about 21% versus the first half of 2018 with 342 million euro. Capex grew and also grew in 2018 as per original business plan at the end of 2017, and this Capex is actually driving the improvement of the main economic KPIs of the company. We are therefore witnessing the possibility of raising the guidance for our EBITDA, which was between 5 and 6% and is now 7%. 933 million was the EBITDA in 2018. We confirm the trend of investments of Capex with 10% up versus 2018, so around 700 million. And we also confirm the guidance for the net financial position for the net debt, because we think we can reach between 2.85 to 2.95 billion euro by the end of the year. During the first part of the year, we've had some significant events. In March, we concluded the acquisition of 51% stake in Pescara Distribuzione Gas, and so we officially are also present in gas distribution, and we want to continue with further acquisitions, and then at a later stage also we want to participate to tenders. We've approved on April the 2nd a business plan review, which we have presented to the market for the 2019-2022 business plan, and by 2022 we should reach 1,270 million euro EBITDA, with an RAB almost reaching 5 billion, investments for 4 billion for the whole period of time, for which obviously the trend this year represents a consistent element, and also a minimum dividend starting 2019 equal to 0.75 cents of euro per share, which obviously we hope can rise further over the life of the plan. In May, we've issued bonds worth 500 million euro with maturity at 9 years and a fixed rate of 1.75%. On page 3, we see some further important activities or events. In May, Fitch Ratings confirmed its BBB plus rating with a stable outlook, and this clearly thanks to the positive results we've reached with regulated activities. Then the acquisition of 90% of DEMAP the owner of a plastic treatment plant in July 2019. The enterprise value of 100% of them was bought at 20 million euro. The EBITDA coming from this activity will be equal to 3.5 million euro, and this is very important for our development strategy within the environment business, because the plant will treat 75,000 tons of plastic per year. We have recently concluded the renewal of the concession for the Peschiera Le Capore water main. We were waiting for this, and we've been waiting for this for the last 24 years, because this basically represents an important element in preparation for the approval of the project and the construction of a second pipeline of the Peschiera water main, the so-called doubling of the Peschiera water main, which should take place in the near future. We hope we can start works by the end of 2020. So the impact of this construction can be foreseen within the business plan. We've recently signed an agreement with Enea for the joint development of circular economy projects. So we will try and cooperate with the idea of sharing scientific and technological experiences for the development of activities connected with circular economy. And we are about to acquire photovoltaic plants. We are at 25 megawatts, making up 50% of the whole plan we had hypothesized, and which should have developed within a 3-year period. So this, in fact, is a very positive trend, because it could lead to conclude this first tranche of development of photovoltaic plants earlier. On page 4, we see a summary of the main financial data. So consolidated revenues at 1,553 million, with a 6.8% increase versus the same period of last year. The EBITDA 502.6 million, plus 11.7% versus the first half of 2018. Part of this increase is due to the effect of Gori's consolidation, 34 million, worth 34 million, which for us is obviously something new that happened at the end of last year, and which is now part of our financial data. EBIT 260.2 million, it grew by 3.8%. The net group profit 143 million, practically identical to the net profit of the first half of 2018. With a plus 0.2%. And Mr. Gola, the CFO, who will go deeper into this, will tell us how important it is to look at this result to understand where our company is going. Capex grew by 21%, in line with our guidance, because within the business plan, a gradual increase has been envisaged up to about 700 million. The net debt is fine, I would say, because we have a good level in line with our budget and our forecasts. And in any case, this sees us within the guidance we have shown between 2.85 and 2.95 billion euro. So at this point on page 5, we have the EBITDA divided amongst the different businesses, and I would ask Mr. Ergola to take the floor here, and then should you want to ask me questions, I'm obviously here to try and answer them. Thank you very much, Stefano. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the group EBITDA grew to 503 million, If we look at the EBITDA with non-regulated and regulated businesses, we're at 80% from regulated business and 20% from non-regulated business. And if we see the different areas, we see that there's been a strong growth in water, mainly due to the consolidation we've had. So now we reach 47% in water in terms of EBITDA, energy infrastructure 37%, commercial and trading 26%, environment and others, engineering and services. You see the different percentages. Water, 244 million in terms of EBITDA, grew by almost 52 million, 34 of which thanks to the consolidation. Energy and infrastructure plus 15 million. Commercial and trading dropped by 12.7 million. The environment grew by 1.7 million, and the other components dropped by 2.6 million. As to the number of employees, the workforce, considering all consolidated companies, include 6,612 employees, increasing due to the consolidation of Gori. If we go on page 6, we can see the details of water. In terms of EBITDA, we go from 192.3 million in the first half of 2018 to 244 million in the first half of 2019. Obviously, the components are, as we've already said, Gori, which is no longer consolidated partly. So we have 34.2 million here. Then Acea 2 with a plus 9.3%, then Acea Atos plus 13.9% versus the previous year, and then companies consolidated using equity method plus 3.5%, 17.8 million, and other consolidated companies 2.1 million with a plus 10.5%. And in fact, the main highlights under water, as I said, are the consolidation of Gori. After the consolidation of Gori, in these last few weeks, we've finalized the company financing for about 100 million. So now this transaction has been totally concluded. We have a growth, and it's interesting here to see that all in all, the growth is only 0.6 million euro, but we have a series of one-off effects that need to be commented. In fact, the effect of this growth, well, in these values, you have to take into account the fact that the water company sold a swap to refinance the company, and this has impacted on Acea's number for about 4.5 million negative. But then on the other hand, we've had positive effects coming from structural growth of all companies, 5.7 million, and the main player here contributed with 5.3 million, mainly due to the fact that after the postponement of the concession saw a strong depreciation, and this led to a strong improvement of the net profit of the company. Then we have post-work adjustments, and so the 2018 result is consolidated also in 2019 in the first half for about 2 million, and then we have to eliminate the 2.6 million from Gori, which last year were in a different perimeter and now are part of the water sector. In terms of Capex, we have 168.3 million, growing by 7.6% versus the previous year, and this growth is totally due to Gori, 21 million. We can go to page 7, where we look at the quantitative data as far as energy and infrastructure goes. Here, with the same perimeter, we have an important growth because we have an EBITDA which from 178.7 grows by 8.2% to 193.3 million, and this growth is mainly driven by distribution, which grew by 13 million. 13 million growth, 6.5 due to a growth coming from the development of investments after we reviewed the regulatory WACC we had at the end of last year. And then we also have about 4.5 million in terms of efficiencies, 1 million of which is an accounting effect due to IFRS 16, whilst the rest is real efficiencies, and about 2 million of one-off impacts. In this area and in these values, we still do not see a real impact. We finalized the acquisition, as Stefano said before, during the month of July, of photovoltaic plants for about 25 megawatts, and this will contribute to the EBITDA with about 11 million. So they'll start contributing to our EBITDA starting in the third quarter this year. As for Capex, also these grow, 133 million plus 26.3% versus the previous 6 months. Let's have a look at commercial and trading.
So commercial and trading business reported dropping EBITDA from 43.9 last year to 31.2 this year. And this is the result of a number of factors. Please note that the performance is, however, positive. I can explain why this drop occurred. The main driver of this reduction of our EBITDA is a regulatory effect. So the regulation changed and had an impact of roughly 6 million in the first year off and 12 million for the full year. If you have a look of the EBITDA development over the past couple of years, half year by half year, as you can see, last year, H1, it reached 43.9, 32 million in the second year off. Now we have a 32, or roughly 31.2 million. Net of this regulatory impact, our EBITDA is growing 6% over the same period of last year, which means that from a commercial point of view, the company is performing. And if you have a look at the energy sold on the free market, we had 100 gross adds versus 80 last year. And if you consider June only, we reached roughly double, so 22,000 versus 12,000 last year in terms of gross adds, which means that our, let's say, marketing strategy is working, and this is clearly shown by the growth of the free market clients by 347, and namely 6% for the energy, 6% gas, so 7% energy and 6% gas. So this means that free market clients are growing. It's just the enhanced or the protected categories that are waiting for the full privatization or liberalization of the market. Page 9, the environment business that performed very well. EBITDA grew by 5.3% to 33.5 from 31.8 same period last year. Good news is that CIP 6 that we expected to end, that is to say the incentives for our burning plant in San Vittore, checking all the existing regulations, we realized that the CIP 6 can be extended to half month of July, which meant 6 million more than last year when CIP 6 still applied. So 6 million above our budget and above our planned target. On top of it, we reported higher compost volumes of 25,000 tons, accounted for additional 2 million of profit or margin. In July, as Stefano pointed out, we completed the acquisition of 90% of DEMAP, that is the owner of a plastic treatment plant that has an authorized capacity of 75,000 tons per year, and we'll see the impact starting Q3 of this year. Page 10, very briefly, all the other businesses. So overseas is growing slightly, 7.9%, million in terms of EBITDA, thanks to the contribution of Aguas de San Pedro. Energy, engineering services slightly dropping, and holding company dropping from 11.7 to 13.8 negative, of course, and this is the result of higher fixed costs. Page 11, you see our EBIT and net profit. EBIT ratio 260, up roughly 4% on the same period as the 2018, and net profit that is the same of last year, 143 million, but net of the TWS acquisition, it should be increasing by roughly 7%. Having a look at the various posts under the EBIT, we see depreciation growing substantially from 160 to 200 million, mainly the result of growing Capex, and also because of the IFRS 16 accounting principle impact that, as you know, will lead to an increase of depreciations in general, in our case by 10 million. Then write-downs and loss provisions. So write-downs amounted to 36 million versus 32 last year. Please consider that here we have the impact of a Gori consolidation, roughly 5 million. And please consider that if you have a look at the evolution of write-downs by year half, last year we had 32 million in the first year half and 43 in the second year half. This means that our write-downs are decreasing as a result of the improvement in the receivables and cash-ins. So, and I'll get back there when I comment on the cash flow. Provisions are flat and tax rate is flat to 30%. Page 12. We see the evolution of Capex, which I've already commented on. You see, all in all, in the first year half, we have reached 342 million, as Stefano already mentioned. We expect to reach roughly 700 million and full year, net of the M&A deals that are not considered under Capex. Such investments are mainly focused on regulated business, so 87% regulated business and 13% non-regulated business. There's a typo in the pie. There it says non-regulated businesses, but it should be non-regulated investment. Of course, Of course, it's not EBITDA, but it's investment from regulated and non-regulated business. So having a look at Capex by business, as for the water business, we plan to make investments on the water and sewage pipes, the maintenance of water centers and treatment plants, 168 million altogether, and roughly 21 million is accounted for by Gori, that was not, as you remember, consolidated last year. As for energy infrastructure business, we see a substantial increase of Capex to upgrade and extend the grid, then to revamp the Mandela and the Tor de Valle and Monte Martini thermoelectric plants or hydroelectric plant in case of Mandela. As for IT, we are developing our IT systems to acquire more customers, so higher cost for customer acquisition. As for environment business, 11 million Capex, mainly to extend the Orvieto landfill and revamp the Monterotondo plant. Other investments are accounted for 2.6 overseas, and the balance IT investment at corporate level. On page 13, you see our cash flow. So we generated 503 million EBITDA in the first year half, and working capital 96, Capex 342. So the free cash flow of 65 million versus 87 previous year. So in terms of working capital absorption, we are in line with our targets and our expectations. So here we have a seasonal impact. So net of seasonality, because as you might remember, Q4 is generally more positive in terms of cash generation and working capital. So the last few months, the working capital absorption was 50 million, in line with the full year targets. In this regard, let's say roughly 47 million are, again, the impact of regulatory changes, and we expect the amount to be very similar at the end of the year for the full year. So, in other words, we are well in line with our strategic business plan, so we expected the absorption of working capital for the full year to be equal to the regulatory impact. In the first year off, we report substantial improvement in receivables, especially in the trading business. If you have a look at number of KPIs, last year we have managed to improve our commercial trading receivables by 5%. The overall cash flow shows 274 million cash absorption. That includes the impact of IFRS 16, namely 57 million. So net of it, cash absorption will be 202 million. So let's say that in terms of cash flow and net debt that I'm going to comment in a minute, are fully in line with our targets, as Stefano already pointed out. We are focusing on the low end of the range of our guidance, net of the impact of IFRS 16 that we did not factor in our guidance, and net of M&A activities that had not been factored in our guidance again. As for our net debt EBITDA is 2.9 times, net of IFRS 16 is 2.8, so flat and in line with the end of 2018. As Stefano already pointed out, we issued a bond, and successfully so, in May 2019, worth 500 million, maturity 9 years, fixed rate 1.75, and in July we completed the increase of the ceiling of the EMTN program to 4 billion to have all the necessary financial flexibility we may need. In terms of debt structure, we have fixed rate 80%, average cost of 2.18%, average term or average maturity 5.8. As for our rating, Fitch rating was confirmed BBB+ and stable outlook. Moody's Baa2, a stable outlook too. So this is it as far as our presentation is concerned. We'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much, Giuseppe. We can start the Q&A session now. This is the Chorus Call operator. We can now start the Q&A session. Attendees willing to ask questions, press star followed by 1 on your keypads. To leave the waiting list, the waiting queue, press star followed by 2. Please ask your questions using your receivers. If you want to ask a question, press star followed by 1 now.
First question, Javier Suarez, Mediobanca, please. Yes, good evening, everybody. I have 2 or 3 questions. The first, on the cash flow statement on page 13, you've explained the working capital absorption, 96 million euro, and now to better understand what you're talking about, if I understood correctly, basically, 50% of this is due to regulatory effects, and this therefore should be there also at the end of the year. And the remaining 50% is your working capital management, and this should go down to 0. Can you please confirm this? Did I understand correctly? Then a question connected to this. The debt guidance was confirmed without considering IFRS 16. So can you tell us what the debt will be by the end of the year, considering IFRS 16? This is the first, and also possible M&As. And then the second question about Capex. Acceleration on Capex has been very strong, it seems. The company has a strong capability of increasing Capex and in its business plan wants to bet a lot on photovoltaic plants. Is there any space to further accelerate this Capex? Because delivery should be faster than the market expected. So do you see these are conditions for you to accelerate your expansion plan? And then one last question on supply activities, which is a bit more on the negative side. I've noticed margin contraction, especially in the liberalized supply business. Can you give us a bit more details about what you're seeing in the market at the moment? Because this should have an impact on margins. So what are you seeing in the liberalized supply market? What's your margin and what's the deviation from your business plan in terms of margin? Thank you very much. Yeah. Javier, yes, hello. As for the working capital, yes, exactly what you said. You understood perfectly. About 50% of working capital absorption in the first half is due to regulatory effects, regulatory impacts, both electricity and water, and all in all, it is worth 47 million. The remaining 50% is a seasonal effect, if we can say so. So currently, we think that by the end of the year, the overall result we expect might not be exactly 50 million, but more or less will be 50 million, and it will all be due to regulatory effects. Now, as to the debt guidance, yes, we've confirmed the guidance, and in fact, our idea is that the result net of IFRS 16 and net of M&As is within the guidance, and on the low part or less than the minimum of the guidance, then this value will have the 57 million of IFRS 16 plus what we will invest in M&As. I can tell you straight away, because obviously we do not know what our M&A activity will be for the rest of the year, because it's difficult to make forecasts, but I can tell you straight away that the impact of acquisitions we have concluded in July on the net financial position is about 80 million. On my side, as for the acceleration of Capex and delivery, because you mentioned both the idea of Capex for infrastructure and Capex for photovoltaic plants. Well, as far as our investment in infrastructure, we had foreseen this acceleration to the extent that the plan already included it, and now we are actually seeing that we can actually keep the pace we wanted to keep. So both water and electricity, the two main businesses in which we invest for infrastructure, we're not having any specific problems. So our plan is absolutely in line with our forecast. As for the acceleration of Capex for M&As connected to photovoltaic plants, I can confirm that this, for me, will be a trend also in the second half of the year. Currently, our target is of completing the 50 megawatt photovoltaic plant we wanted to acquire as quickly as possible. We want to do this within this year or maybe the beginning of next year. And I think we won't need much of next year to actually reach this target. And then, given that our pipeline keeps evolving, I think we will assess the situation and we might decide to further increase such numbers. But for the moment, our target is that of completing the 50 megawatt as quickly as possible. As for margin contraction, well, I want to give you a bit more color on what we already said for the performance in the commercial and trading. Well, making a distinction between the economic performance and the operational performance. Well, from the operational performance point of view, the commercial machine and all the initiatives we've launched and we are still developing during this first half started working and started providing positive results, especially in terms of our sales capability. So we increased the number of customers, the number of new customers in the non-regulated market, in the non-regulated businesses. Clearly, in regulated businesses, given it's a regulated market, obviously we do not have any preventive action when we lose such customers. So we're comparing the situation with our plan, well, customers maybe are exiting a bit faster, given that there has been strong pressure from our competitors. So we are waiting to move to the free market, and everybody is. And now in terms of margins, we are in line with expectations, with our targets, net, unfortunately, of the RCW component, which decreased and which strongly impacted on Acea, given that we are we manage non-regulated, regulated markets, especially in central and southern Italy. So we are the main operators who suffered from this impact. And this, as I said before, is worth 12 million in terms of margin on a yearly basis. So this is possibly the main driver of such a reduction. And as for the trend, as for general trend, we are positive and we think that the second half will grow versus the first half and will partly offset such reduction. In terms of the market, what we see is that the market has a strong competitive pressure. Such pressure is increasing, possibly due to the idea that we're all going to move towards a free market. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Xavier.
Next question by Enrico Bartoli, Main First. Good evening. I've got a few questions, in fact. First question about the improvement of the guidance that you provided us with. Can you elaborate on the drivers that led you to review and upgrade the guidance, let's say? Then a question about the water business and GORI in particular. You pointed out that GORI contributed 34 million in H1. If I remember correctly, you had provided a guidance of roughly 50 million for the full year 2019. I wonder whether GORI is performing better than expected and whether the 50 million guidance must be reconsidered and upward, of course. Then the third question about electricity distribution business that performed very well in terms of EBITDA. EBITDA grew substantially in H1. I remember that also last year there were some positive one-offs. So can you elaborate on the drivers of such improvement? So you mentioned cost efficiency. What was the contribution of RAB increase, and whether in H1 positive one-offs were also reported? And can we expect the same trend for the second part of 2019? And the final question on water business regulatory framework. So we expect the next steps from the authority. Have you already had any meeting with the representatives of the water authority? And what are your expectations? Do you expect the current regulation to be confirmed? Do you expect any changes? Thank you very much. All right. So I'll try and answer the question, Mr. Donnarumma, about the guidance. Well, clearly, the first year off of 2019 was characterized by the drivers we mentioned during our presentation that drove our EBITDA up. We do not expect any change, and therefore, should we proceed as we have done so far, EBITDA guidance has been improved by 7%, but that was, let's say, conservative. It is true that there are some factors that materialize in Q1 and are not likely to materialize again in the second year after. For instance, chip 6 as for the environment business. So we have made our projections, and we can say that considering that we proceeding as we have done so far with the regulatory impact, the increase of tariffs that we enjoyed, the increase of Capex, well, these are drivers that will drive our EBITDA growth in the second year off as well. As for GORI, well, GORI is one of the drivers, 34 million. That was the projection for the full year. Full year would not be 70, would certainly be less than that, probably 50, but we certainly expect an increase. Then we have electric power distribution. We already mentioned that we have 6.5 million more that come from the updated tariffs. 4.5 million is accounted for by cost cutting. And this is, again, an area we have been focusing on and will go and focus on, and then 2 million was no recurring items. So this explains why we expect that these two core businesses, besides the environment business, will drive the improvement of our EBITDA. As for regulation of the water business, we are talking about rumors because no meeting has been held with the authority as yet. Just had preliminary meetings. My idea that I've already uttered out in the past is the following. Despite all the rumors circulating on the changes in the regulatory framework, what I expect is a change in the tariff structure for water supply that may have an impact on cost effectiveness, let's say, which is exactly what happened in the electric power business. And this will also have an impact on the WACC when we actually factor in Capex. But I believe that this will take longer than we may think because we're still waiting for the TOTEX issue to be solved for the electric power businesses. So honestly, I do not expect any major impact in the near future. Of course, I do expect changes in the midterm that will be following closely and will certainly be discussing with the authority.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Enrico. Next question, Emanuele Oggioni, Banca Akros, please. Yes, good evening, everybody. I have two questions. The first on the last acquisition. First, I wanted to ask you what is the energy account for these plants and the residual part of such incentives, and then also those 75 million, is this already net considering minorities or not? This was my first question. The second question instead on ARERA for the electricity distribution market, where we heard about measures to promote the consolidation of this business. I don't know whether you have already looked at such documents, and so I wanted to know whether you already have an opinion on this. Sure, yes. As for the photovoltaic plant acquisition, I mean, obviously these are very many plants, different ones. We have all types of different sections, from the second to the fifth. We have second and fourth mainly, but we also have the third and the fifth. As for 75 million, that's 100%, so it does not take into account minorities. Minorities are only present for 20 megawatt, where we acquired 75%, sorry. As for the residual duration, well, the average residual duration of incentives is 11-12 years, whilst the average useful life of plants is about 20 years. As we already told when we launched our business strategic plan, we're working with acquisitions with a cherry-picking attitude. So we're really assessing lots of 1 megawatt plants, and this clearly gives us an advantage, because if we can acquire them, we will do at lower prices versus big packages of photovoltaic plants, where we'd have to obviously accept lower yields. But then on the other hand, it is also clear that we have a huge variety of plans and of companies, which are obviously more difficult to manage. Now, I'll try and answer your question, and the remarks I'm going to make are based upon very little, because I read the documents last night, and I'll tell you what I think about them. I want to say something more about what Mr. Gola said before, because he said talked about a fifth, but instead we're talking about the second and the fourth energy account. So we're 80% on fourth and 12% on second. But now, given this, by reading the new document, you find some aspects which are not worrying for us, because they impact a non-significant perimeter of activities as far as our distribution goes. And here I am, for example, referring to some of the aspects having to do with very high voltage, which don't have a strong impact on us, or maybe power changes. I mean, that's another important topic, but the number of such power changes and the different way in which this is dealt with is not something that creates lots of worries to us, whilst instead I see aspects having to do with the treatment of contribution on works in condominiums is something I see as very positive. I was amongst the first who had talked about this with the authority. I mean, it's absolutely important to review these types of plans to guarantee a higher level of continuity in terms of low voltage and the possibility to better read digital counters. And then also to actually enable people to use more electricity, because you can increase the power of such meters. Then also electrical vehicles is another positive part. So new tariffs for electricity for such cars is interesting. I don't have any specific worry as for the impact all this could have on our business, on Acea. Thank you very much.
Next question, Stefano Gaverini, Equita SIM. Good evening. Got a couple of questions. Mr. Donnarumma, can you elaborate a little bit on the second consultation paper that provides for distributors to acquire services like auxiliary services? So I got the impression that this is the time when the DSOs will be introduced, and I don't know whether it's going to benefit you. Then can you spend a couple of words on the waste business, mainly on the acquisition of the core, that company that you mentioned that you were going to acquire in the northern part of Italy, but I expected you to focus mainly on your area, so the center of Italy. So consider what is happening in Rome. Maybe this waste emergency may give rise to opportunities for you. And then a final point, the Draghi law or the Draghi bill is over, I believe, or do you think it may be revitalized and discussed again in the Italian Parliament? Well, as for the evolution of auxiliary services, I can tell you that we are on the eve of a major regulatory debate on the DSO. I've been an advocate of this, and I'm sure something is going to change. So issues like demand response and other similar issues will certainly create new business opportunities, and we are definitely focused on a number of projects relating to this, and will be again implementing actions in line with the existing regulatory framework and the future regulatory framework. So we are very, very active. I already mentioned the risers and the electric charges, and we have submitted a number of proposals to the European Commission already. As to your question on waste, the acquisition of a DEMAP, that is a plastic treatment plant, is perfectly in line with our strategy. Don't be misled by the geographical implications, because as far as we're concerned, acquiring such a company means entering new business and acquiring new know-how. So this acquisition is not simply to increase the total amount of waste we can treat, which is, however, important because it certainly contributes to growth and value generation. But thanks to this partnership, please consider we never acquire 100%. We acquire majority stake when we make an acquisition, but we want the businessman who funded the company to stay on and stay with us, because we want to strengthen our management team. Consider that we want to double, if not triple, our business in waste. It is extremely important for us to acquire more know-how and extend our management team. And this acquisition must be considered from this perspective. Please consider that the amount of waste generated in the south and the center of Italy is particularly high, and that's why we want to be, again, proactive. The current waste emergency in Rome is certainly a crisis, is an emergency, is not an opportunity. We are suffering from it. However, the overall waste treatment system of Italy is undergoing a crisis, particularly in the south and the center of Italy. And this is why we are certainly willing and ready to play an active part in developing the infrastructure that are missing in the center and south of Italy. And as you're going to hear, this acquisition will not be confined to Piedmont only. As for the DAC bill, I don't think that the bill on public water, or publicly owned water, is not over. So I believe that the DAGA bill is now being debated, and this is why it is also being amended now. Let's see how it will be amended, but I believe that certainly this bill is not over. It will go on be debated. I don't know what the final result will be, but I'm sure that all the players of the industry will contribute to this debate to have the good things that are already there to be retained and preserved. For instance, businessmen can, of course, make investments in the water business, but then we are also able to ensure the top quality level of services and of supply, and this must not be jeopardized by regulatory decisions or political decisions. Certainly, the debate is going on, and I don't see it can actually be sped up. And when you said that you are certainly doing very well with the riser pipes, well, can we say then that investment can accelerate once the new regulations on electric power distribution are adopted? Well, risers or riser pipes are certainly an integral part of a multi-annual investment plan. When you have a complex business plan like ours that provides for 5 billion euros for 1 billion euro over a period of 5 years devoted only to the water business, well, this implies many new production lines that will become operative, and that will be definitely favored by the new regulations.
There aren't any more questions, it seems. So thank you very much. And now, thank you very much from all of us. Thank you very much, and see you again soon.